Hey.
Coming off a critically panned but commercially lucrative second installment of Jurassic Park's sequel series, Universal Pictures plowed ahead with its plans to finish the trilogy it started in 2015. Jurassic World Dominion would re-tap Jurassic World's director Colin Trevorrow and hire legacy actors to round out the cast. But would it be enough to wash away the bad taste left by Fallen Kingdom and end the trilogy on a high note? Hi, my name is Brian I, and welcome back to Jurassic Kingdom as we continue to explore the declining quality of the franchise, where each sequel went wrong, and how they could have been fixed. This is How to Fix Jurassic World Dominion. Jurassic World Dominion is a very strange film for me. When it first dropped, I gave it a fairly positive review in my fevered excitement over seeing franchise veterans Sam Neill, Laura Dern, and Jeff Goldblum return to the roles I had idolized as a child. Hi guys, now that I've seen Dominion, I wanted to share a spoiler-filled review with you guys so that you guys can see what a fanatic thinks of it. A long time ago, I decided nothing's ever gonna top this. Nothing's ever going to reach those heights again. Anything that we got after this is just icing on a cake, and you might as well enjoy it. That's why I found Dominion to be such a fun ride. It's just really, really enjoyable. There's a lot of great sequences in there. Not too many inventive dinosaur deaths, but the fact that there were so many dinosaurs and a lot of them were animatronic, which looked great. There's this wonderful shot, you can see it in some of the trailers and commercials, of the Giganotosaurus roaring, like lifting his head. It's just amazing, beautiful shot. Obviously, seeing the legacy characters again was incredible. They were easily, I feel, the best part of the movie, the most cohesive part of the movie. Seeing them in action again as if they had never missed a beat, like they had played those characters every year for the last 20 years. The two separate storylines did seem a little disjointed, going back and forth between them, and I feel like they might have been better served having the two groups meet a little bit earlier in the film. The finale too was a little too familiar, and might have been better served with something a little bit more emotional and intimate. Just realized I didn't say a whole lot of spoilers, but it's a good movie. I felt that way. A lot of people feel that way. Go watch it. I tempered that mini review on TikTok with another one focused on what I felt were major missed opportunities. But as time marched on and I sat through a few more viewings, I began to realize that even my nostalgia over seeing the legacy characters couldn't save this film from being anything more than an empty, underwhelming, sporadically entertaining drag on the series' reputation. It wasn't so much Jurassic Park 6 or even Jurassic World 3. It was Fallen Kingdom 2, ratcheting up the abandoned spectacle that characterized its predecessor and hoping that throwing enough likable characters and insane dinosaur action would distract you from just how out of ideas they had almost certainly become. Dominion catches up with trilogy mainstays Owen Grady and Claire Dearing in a world that has, in 4 short years, somehow become overrun by the dinosaurs freed at Lockwood Manor. Harboring the clone Maisie Lockwood from shady entities who wish to exploit her, they have gone to ground in the wilderness. When poachers in the employ of Louis Dodgson's Bison kidnap her, Owen and Claire spring into action to rescue her from whatever the evil company, which has been collecting InGen dinosaurs and creating purer versions of the original dinosaurs with the help of Henry Wu and keeping them in a giant facility and preserve within the Italian Dolomite Mountains, has planned for her. Meanwhile, Ellie Sattler and Ian Malcolm have begun investigating a strange phenomena that is killing crops that are not supplied by biosin, which leads them to recruit their old friend Dr. Alan Grant to infiltrate biosin's facilities and get the evidence needed to expose Dodgson's mad scheme. Dodgson's mad scheme to corner the market in agriculture using gigantic genetically modified locusts. And that is how the Jurassic franchise wanted to end. With that. It's just so weird, this movie, and the first indication that things were off to me was when Colin Trevorrow, the director, tweeted out that there would be no hybrids in Dominion. Now, Anyone who has watched this series before will tell you. I was never ever a fan of the hybridization of the dinosaurs, even though it was and remains a perfectly valid path for the story to take. But one of the biggest plot points of the first two Jurassic World movies involved the genetic tampering of DNA. And the idea that they would abandon that concept 2/3 of the way through this trilogy seemed like an odd choice. At the time of reading that, I was excited, because I was glad to be rid of the inherent silliness that hung around the hybrid idea. But in retrospect, this makes the trilogy feel fundamentally disjointed. 2 films revolve around the creation of hybrid dinosaurs. The third revolves around genetically modified bugs. And it's not just this concept that they abandoned for the finale. Blue the Velociraptor has played pivotal roles in both previous films, but the second she becomes a parent, she is sidelined for the majority of the film, serving only as a bookend for the story. Her story parallels that of Owen and Claire's, but where they have a proactive role in the search for their respective children, Blue must wait off-screen for Owen to make good on the promise he makes to her to return Beta, her offspring. It defangs Blue, turning her into an NPC that sends the hero on a side quest and causing her ongoing importance to the series to falter in this final chapter. This taps into something that really annoys me. We live in a golden age of sequels and cinematic universes. Like it or not, successful films and revived intellectual properties are seen by the motion picture industry as potential franchises. Universal Pictures and the producers knew the Jurassic World movies would be a hit, and if they thought they were gambling with the first Jurassic World, they certainly didn't think they were gambling on Fallen Kingdom or Dominion. With Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard as the faces of the series, they were bound to be hits, regardless of how good they were. So why, oh why, does this whole trilogy feel more unconnected than the Jurassic Park trilogy, which are episodic in nature? Because neither Lost World nor Jurassic Park 3 were givens in 1993 when Jurassic Park dropped. In those days, as I've said before, sequels were not seen as artistically fulfilling or narratively necessary to great movies. While the nature of Jurassic Park lent itself to continuing adventures, it took years for a sequel to be announced, let alone filmed. Fallen Kingdom was officially announced a month after Jurassic World dropped, but talks of doing an overarching narrative were present in discussions between Trevorrow and Steven Spielberg during the early stages of Jurassic World's production. So the filmmakers knew from the jump that Jurassic World wasn't a standalone film, that if it was successful, sequels were guaranteed to be made. But, like the Star Wars sequel trilogy before it, no one involved in the production thought it was a smart idea to sit and jot down some bullet points that would allow each movie to lead smoothly into the other, to make it seem like even though each film had a voice, had a satisfying story, and ended on its own terms, when viewed as a whole, it would tell one large story. Point in case, the original Star Wars trilogy. George Lucas had his galaxy planned out before a single frame was shot, and though details and characters and motivations shifted as he made his movies, Lucas had a roadmap to guide him to his conclusion in Return of the Jedi. And say what you want about his prequel movies, and I'm not exactly fond of them, no one can tell me those movies don't tell a single 3-film story broken up almost as well as the Holy Trilogy, which slots in fairly well with what he'd done in the 70s and the 80s. Why is it then that filmmakers in this day and age, who have to contend with the likes of Kevin Feige's Marvel Cinematic Universe, and having the benefit of the entire history of storytelling from which to draw, don't feel inclined to set themselves up with an outline that can handle the idea of an overarching story? The easy answer is they don't care. They hide behind the excuse that they are focusing on making each film as good as it could possibly be. This is what Christopher Nolan said about his Dark Knight trilogy, and it's almost like it gave license to less talented directors and writers to use the same reason for not taking this extra step. And while Dark Knight Rises is not a particularly worthy conclusion to the incredible heights of Batman Begins and Dark Knight, it nevertheless jives well thematically and narratively with its predecessors. Because Nolan and his brother, who helped write the films, cared. They wanted to tell a story wherein Bruce Wayne gets his happy ending, and Batman could become a symbol that would endure beyond the individual who wore the mask. They succeeded. But what precisely is the narrative of the Jurassic World trilogy? It very much seemed, with the first two films, like they were aiming to make it about the dangers of tampering with DNA, which was only slightly removed from the Park trilogy's themes of the dangers of playing God and the threat unfettered capitalism has on science. But in Dominion, the ball is fumbled on a 4th down in the final seconds of an already middling game. There are no genetically modified dinosaurs in this one. Louis Dodgson even makes it a point to clarify that all the new dinosaurs they've created are pure and appear and behave as they did when they lived in the Mesozoic. There are bugs, though, and I guess them being genetically modified continues the theme into Dominion, except it's completely undercut by the existence of another genetically modified being who is seen as special and singular and amazing. That being is Isabella Sermon's Maisie Lockwood. Once again, Sermon's performance is too good for the character and the movie, and here we learn that she was not the test tube clone Eli Mills had said she was in Fallen Kingdom, which is dumb. It's just so dumb. But clearing the good name of Benjamin Lockwood and glorifying Charlotte Lockwood in a virgin mother sense just fell so very, very flat, retroactively robbing Fallen Kingdom of one of its most daring narrative choices. And as I said, it pulls the rug out from under this entire series. There's an argument to be made that the theme of the series is that even among the dangers of genetic tampering, there are potential benefits. But the franchise makes no effort to highlight or address it. They just throw stuff at the wall and hope it lands, and in the meantime, they play you all their greatest hits because they think that's their best angle. Several characters from the franchise return, even if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for them to all be in the narrative, including a villain from the very first film, and fear not, we will shortly return to Louis Dodgson. We get a new, bigger, badder dinosaur in the Giganotosaurus, which turns out to be the least impactful major dinosaur in the entire franchise. We get the over-the-top action set pieces that the Jurassic World films had become known for, and we also get Henry Wu in league with the villain to do something terrible, but he somehow still remains a sympathetic character who never actually gets what's coming to him. I honestly don't know where to start with this thing. As I mentioned in my previous video, I prefer this movie over Fallen Kingdom. And for anyone keeping score, my rankings are as follows. Fallen Kingdom at the bottom of the barrel. Dominion up 1. Jurassic Park 3 at number 4. Jurassic World at 3. Lost World in second place. And way up above all of them is Jurassic Park, so high above all its successors that they'd need a telescope to see it in orbit, and the only reason that Dominion has a leg up on Fallen Kingdom is that it features the legacy characters. Otherwise, it is of the same quality as its immediate predecessor, which is to say, not very good at all. Like Fallen Kingdom, the writers gave up attempting to ground their fictional universe, abandoning serious continuity for the sake of going big. It's clear that they wrote the climax of Fallen Kingdom with the intention of setting up the whole dinosaurs in the wide world concept for Dominion, but it's also clear that they had no plan about how extensive the spread of the dinosaurs would be for the next movie. And understanding that the average moviegoer would by and large not remember or care that only a handful of dinosaurs would be released into a localized area of one state in one country, the filmmakers opted to go scorched earth for their finale. Now the dinosaurs are literally everywhere, herds of them, even though many of those same species were represented by only 1 or 2 individuals at Lockwood Manor. Not only that, but species that were not present at Lockwood Manor, Isla Nublar, or Isla Sorna are now also part of this spread. Now, I understand that the lore Netflix's chaos theory is building is that secret labs run by sketchy people were being built and used to create new species for the purposes of selling them to the highest bidder, but all of this is supposed to have happened inside of 4 years. That is not a long time. Jurassic World had 20 species in 2015, up from 8 when it opened in 2005. It took Henry Wu, with all the resources and technology of Masrani Global at his disposal, 10 years to create 12 new species. Granted, there are an untold number of labs and people behind the supposed spread of the dinosaurs on the mainland, but one of the building blocks of the JP universe is that Wu is such a genius that he is, if not one of a kind, then an exceptionally skilled geneticist with very few peers. Dominion asks the fans of the franchise to accept that Wu is not a talent above the rest, as the series has led us to believe, but just a run-of-the-mill scientist whose job and abilities are easy enough for any geneticist to be able to perform. Because the film also asks us to believe that there are enough of them in the world to not only manifest so many animals and so many different species in such a short span of time, that they are also so incompetent that the dinosaurs immediately escape and become a constant presence around around the globe. The Atrociraptors are the prime example of this. These are animals that had never previously appeared or been mentioned in the film canon, and yet, in the 4 years between films, Atrociraptor DNA was discovered, modified, and developed. The embryos were grown and eventually hatched a healthy clutch, and the 4 were trained to heed the laser command that previously only the prototype Indoraptor was capable of. Ignoring the tangled web that comes with the Chaos Theory canon that the Atrociraptors were also whistle-trained by Creepypasta the person, it still leaves us to wonder how the hell the laser command secret fell into Sayona Santos' hands in the first place, and why, if it was possible to imbue any species of dinosaur with it, why every animal that appears in Dominion, which wasn't created by InGen before the events of Fallen Kingdom, doesn't also have this programmed into their DNA. It makes the entire concept of the Indoraptor feel less unique. Part of what made it special was this feature, but it turns out nothing is special about it at all. Sorry, tangent. The timetable doesn't seem to work. It's crazy to think Owen Grady spent all those years working on the Raptor Pack to get them to kind of sort of maybe accept human commands, only for 2 movies later people can just program dinosaurs to do anything they want, removing both what made Owen relevant and the threat of an unpredictable animal. 4 years. The central conceit of this film, under the slightest scrutiny, does not make sense at all. In 4 years, 40 animals have become thousands, if not millions, of individuals, and they have spread to every corner of the planet. But the filmmakers didn't care because they figured that while the fandom might question this kind of thing, the larger audience wouldn't care. And they were right. Dominion landed with a solid from everyone, including and especially fans. We came to see something pivotal and game-changing, or at least engaging and heartfelt. What we got was careless writing, mostly formulaic action, and bland character work. Character arcs have gone extinct altogether. The only one who kind of gets one in Dominion is Maisie herself, who really only learns that she's not the test tube baby she thought she was and was born naturally, so that makes everything better. Oh, Henry Wu is suddenly regretful about his work, but that change happens before the movie even begins, rather than as a result of his journey through the story. Tension? Forget it. It's not important. Blast sound and light at the audience, and that's gonna make it all work, right? And man, that is what's so damned frustrating about this movie. The big, fat, obvious missed opportunities presented by the narrative. Because Dominion had the potential to reach the heights of Jurassic Park if the writers and producers in Trevorrow had given half a crap, but they didn't. It was an obvious cash grab, written without thought, drafted frivolously, directed lazily. For the love of all that is holy, they had Lewis Dodgson, the person who had the biggest impact on the franchise, the one person who set in motion the entire sequence of events that led the story where it had gone, and they don't even acknowledge it. Like at all. Not even a hint outside the appearance of the Barbasol can in his office and his ultimate demise mirroring that of his pawn, Dennis Nedry. Can you imagine for just a second that the legacy characters had somehow discovered he had, in fact, been responsible for everything they had endured since 1993? The kind of emotional depths they could have reached with such a revelation? Instead, they ignore Dodgson's previous role altogether, unnecessarily creating a character who could have literally had any other name and worked just as well. It was as if the filmmakers only named the character Lewis Dodgson to excite fans, but never intended to truly plumb the possibilities born of that inclusion. And although it is the biggest, most obvious missed opportunity, it is not the only one, not by a long shot. As with every previous Jurassic World, it doesn't allow for the inclusion of any returning characters who were previously children. This has always frustrated me because the filmmakers are always willing to jump at the potential of bringing back adult characters who were adults when they first experienced the nightmares that were Isla Nublar and Sorna, but failed to realize that the psychological damage it would do to a child has unlimited narrative value. Lex and Tim are obvious matches, and I've explored Tim's return already with both How to Fix Jurassic Park 3 and How to Fix Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. But it would also have been interesting to see Vanessa Lee Chester's Kelly Malcolm or Trevor Morgan's Eric Kirby in some capacity, even if they had just been supporting or cameo characters. The film does cram in a ton of characters, both new and established, and it makes the movie feel almost overstuffed, and yet somehow so hollow that I imagine the companies responsible for those big chocolate Easter bunnies might have a legitimate legal case against it. One of the reasons for that is Dominion lacks that compelling through line that ties together the two disparate journeys being traveled during the runtime. The legacy characters are investigating the destruction of the crops by the enormous locusts Bison made. And again, while it's great to see them, nothing about this plotline feels meaty enough for the grandiose fanfare of returning leads. It's not personal for any of them, except maybe Grant, who is clearly doing it to be close to Ellie again. Owen and Claire, on the other hand, are on their mission entirely for personal reasons. Ironically, it might be the most convincing motivation to do anything at all in the entire trilogy. They treat the abduction of Maisie with all the seriousness it deserves, and I can appreciate that. Now, even though Dodgson and Wu want Maisie for reasons related to their stupid locusts, the two missions never feel relevant to each other, even when worlds collide and the two groups finally fully meet. No weight is granted the moment, and we don't feel like their storylines combining makes anything that came before it matter. Even the bigger and badder dinosaur, the immense Giganotosaurus, has nothing to offer us except a great, if inaccurate, design. Its inclusion in the story leads nowhere, and it has no impact on the story, on the characters, or on the themes presented in the movie. It's the first big new dinosaur in the series who doesn't even get the dignity of chomping on a human character, not even a nameless extra to give it a sense of threat. If you remove this dinosaur from the story, nothing would change at all. Breaking things down, the Tyrannosaur in Jurassic Park forces some characters to travel on foot to return to the relative safety of the visitor center, and other characters to venture out into the park to secure their release. It is responsible for the deaths of one named character and the serious injury of another. Later, it is the Tyrannosaur that offers salvation when all hope is lost at the film's climax. In Lost World, the mated pair of Tyrannosaurs are responsible for the destruction of the protagonist's vehicles and equipment, the dissolution of the supergroup that forms when the raiders and gatherers coalesce, and are the focus of the third act shenanigans on mainland San Diego. They are responsible for the deaths of several characters, many of them named. The Spinosaurus in Jurassic Park 3 is the catalyst for almost every single major event in the movie, starting with the stranding of Eric Kirby on the island, the subsequent stranding of the rest of the main cast, as well as chasing the group into the aviary and destroying their boat afterwards, forcing them into a confrontation with the raptors that wouldn't have happened otherwise. It kills a couple of people and even bodies a T-Rex. Jurassic World's Indominus Rex was basically the focus of the entire movie, eating everything in sight, including a ton of humans, and just being the reason for everything bad happening all the time. The Indoraptor only appears in the third act of Fallen Kingdom, but its presence is felt throughout the film. The retrieval of the Indominus bone from the lagoon, the scramble to capture Blue, amassing capital to fund the development of further Indoraptors by selling off other dinosaurs, it's all in service of this one hybrid, and it kills a lot for its limited screen time. The Giganotosaurus gets none of that. Its purpose in the film is just to be there and be a not T-Rex, to fulfill the bigger, badder rule the filmmakers saddled themselves with back in 2001. The thing that kills me the most is watching it lumber listlessly around as the supergroup tries to get away from it and hide in the observation structure. That dinosaur didn't seem at all interested in eating them until they were basically safe. I thought certainly the filmmakers would at least give it someone, especially someone important, to consume, to perhaps drive home what a threat it was. But nope, what Grant calls the biggest carnivore the world has ever seen turns out to be almost completely unmemorable, given nothing to do and no reason to even be in the movie. Which kind of brings me to that climax, which is so categorically awful, it's hard to even fathom what the people behind the camera were thinking. I like the forest fire, it had a great atmosphere and was a stunning backdrop visually for the finale. But Dominion dials up the lunacy to 11 for its final fight, pitting the Giga against the T-Rex and the Therizinosaurus in a Fast and the Furious level of ludicrousness that completely pulled me out of the movie. Is this really the same timeline that included Jurassic Park? The grounded nature of that film and its immediate successor are a long way away. But more than that, the fight has no bearing on the ending of the movie, which we haven't seen 3 times before. A dinosaur is chasing the good guys, and another dinosaur appears to confront it, allowing the cast to escape. We saw it in Jurassic Park. We saw it in Jurassic World. We saw it again in Fallen Kingdom. Say what you will about their endings, and I definitely have, but huge credit to Lost World and Jurassic Park 3 for not ending the exact same way as Jurassic Park, because the JW trilogy didn't get the memo that they could do something different. Dominion's problems are myriad. The cracks created by Fallen Kingdom's ill-conceived ideas became Dominion's chasms to cross, or in some cases, fill with hot garbage. They had all the elements to make an amazing conclusion to not just the trilogy, but to the series itself. A cast of previous characters played expertly by their respective actors, a villain with major ties to the franchise, a world overrun with dinosaurs, and a budget that would make most directors swoon. What they lacked was an engaging story, with some deep emotional weight for these characters, and a sense of overwhelming odds or dread about the changing world. What should be a triumphant end feels limp and undercooked. It's honestly so depressing to watch this movie and not feel anything. Jurassic Park, for as many times as I've seen it, can still trigger sensation in me. The first sighting of the Brachiosaurus, the Rex stepping out onto the road, the raptors in the kitchen, the heavy relief in the helicopter. But Dominion doesn't even try to struggle with any of that. It makes hollow attempts at majesty and terror, but most of the time they are complete failures. There are two exceptions to that. The most successful of these two is the introduction of the Therizinosaurus, which may just be the best 2 minutes in the entire movie. Some of the dread of that sequence is sapped because the character experiencing it is Claire, and we know she isn't going to be killed off, but it's still an excellently paced and shot scene, and I'm willing to give Trevorrow his due for that. The other one that was actually pretty great was the Atrociraptor chase, because I do absolutely get a kick out of sequences, acts, or even whole movies that deal with being chased by something that seems inevitable, and the paranoia that comes with it. The first Terminator had that feeling. So did Mad Max Fury Road, the first two Alien movies, and a little closer to our topic, the raptors in the kitchen in Jurassic Park, and the entire first season of Chaos Theory. I think the Atrociraptor chase skirted that feeling on several occasions, but loses a lot of points for how quickly and how far it escalates before it's over, going from a close call on-foot race to an aerial escape in minutes. And in those minutes, a lot of tension dissipates when newcomer Kayla Watts, played with easy charm by DeWanda Wise, saves Claire with little motivation and zero explanation as to how she found her. Side note, I have to say that the casting director for the Jurassic World movies might be the most talented person behind the camera, because nearly every actor in this series crushes it, with very few exceptions. Despite how little they have to do in the grand scheme of things, the actors playing support for Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard are honestly highlights. From Omar Sy, Jake Johnson, and Lauren Lapkus in Jurassic World, to Daniela Pineda and Justice Smith in Fallen Kingdom, and finally, Mamadou Ache, DeWanda Wise, and Campbell Scott as Dodgson in Dominion. They all do a lot with a little, and for that at least we can be thankful. In a way, however, it's pretty upsetting, because these incredible thespians are handed the possibility of a career-defining character in a huge franchise, or at least the potential to show range, and the writers fail them spectacularly. Given so little to do, they don't stick in the mind of a casual fan the way they otherwise would, which is why in many of my rewrites I've gone out of my way to provide arcs, however small, to many of my supporting characters. I feel that the more real they seem, the more impactful a story can become. In the end, Dominion's conclusion doesn't feel earned or satisfying. In fact, very little about the movie is earned or satisfying. Like Fallen Kingdom, Dominion can't be truly helped by tweaking a few things here and there. It needs a full rewrite, a page 1 reset to pick up the ball dropped by Fallen Kingdom, satisfy the intent to explore the idea of dinosaurs on the mainland, reintroduce Louis Dodgson to the franchise, and include legacy characters to deepen Jurassic World's connection to its predecessor trilogy. As per usual, keep in mind that for this video, we are preserving the continuity of the previous films as they were released to us, not any of the continuities I've created for this series. If you need a refresher on the series, go ahead and find a link to some recaps in the description below. Now buckle your seatbelts and brace yourselves for impact, because we're crash landing this thing into a frozen lake and it's gonna get chilly. As we go on this little journey, I want you to keep timeline in the front of your mind. As I am writing as a fan, the chronology of events are important to me, and I don't typically like when things are retconned to satisfy the story that the writers want to tell. As an addendum to that, I wrote this exact sentiment 2 weeks before I read that one of the rules David Koepp, Jurassic World Rebirth's writer, had set for himself was that he would not contradict anything that had previously happened. I'm so glad that he respects the canon, because it doesn't seem like the writers of Fallen Kingdom and Dominion did. When working within a franchise situation, it should be understood that the stories one tells ought not conflict with what's come before. And if that limitation is too difficult for a writer to work under, then perhaps that project isn't the right fit for that writer. It betrays a dismissiveness with the material previously established that does not itself endear the new writer's work to the fans that made a sequel or prequel possible for them to make. Fans like continuity. They like when things fit together. It's why fans like me were initially so upset when Disney bought Lucasfilm and nuked the Star Wars expanded universe. We had an established timeline in which we had invested our interests and attention, and which had now been tossed aside in favor of new stories. In a pop culture which has embraced multiverses, it's an easier pill to swallow. But back then, it was heartbreaking for fans who had read the novels and the comics and played the video games and thought, yes, Thank you, Pablo Hidalgo, for keeping things so relatively straight. But the Jurassic World movies continuously break their own continuity, or ignore convincing timetables, or rely on tie-in material to make sense of their arbitrary choices, all of which are frankly lazy ways to write a follow-up. As much as I dislike some of Fallen Kingdom's narrative choices, there are some interesting ways to interpret and build on them that would retroactively make them work better in the context of the whole trilogy. And that, dear viewers, was the biggest challenge in reimagining Dominion. It was telling a compelling story that honored the kind of tale the filmmakers wanted to tell, while also making Fallen Kingdom's silliness appear calculated and intentional. I also want to note that I found certain elements of my previous rewrites to be juicy or useful enough that I repurposed them because they didn't upset established continuity. But I want to be clear that this version of Dominion follows the Fallen Kingdom that was released in theaters, not my How to Fix fanfiction. Lastly, unlike the last 3 How to Fix videos, I will refrain from going scene by scene through the story. It is just so very dense that I was struggling to finish writing this without actually writing the script itself. Instead, I'm reverting to my Lost World strategy of explaining the characters, their motivations, and the circumstances of the narrative, with a few key sequences explained, especially in the 3rd act. So with that in mind, let's take the first steps towards the end of the Jurassic World trilogy, as I would have liked to see it. Our Dramatis persona is going to be a doozy. You may even get the sense that I'm throwing too many legacy characters at the audience. Will it seem like I'm letting the Jurassic fan inside me just go nuts? If so, the answer is yes, definitely. We were promised an Avengers-like conclusion to the franchise, and I'm taking that to heart. If Infinity War and Endgame can combine plot threads and characters from almost 20 movies, then surely Dominion can do the same for 5 films. So that's what I'm doing, creating the epic conclusion that is in the same vein as the team-up movies, to do right by previously established characters without shoving them haphazardly into situations that wouldn't believably concern them. If they have no reason to be anywhere near this story, then they are not in it. This will be an ensemble film, but its anchors will remain Owen Grady and Claire Dearing. Their arcs will reflect one of the major themes of the story, which is closure. After her failures at Jurassic World and Eli Mills' manipulation of her in Fallen Kingdom, Claire is feeling understandably driven to rectify her mistakes. Obsessed, actually. As in the delivered film, she, Zia, and Franklin have begun liberating captured dinosaurs. In our story, Owen is also a big part of this journey. He is finally ready for some real progress and wishes to deepen and further his relationship with Claire. But Claire is so focused on her redemption that they have been at a standstill for the year. Yes, 1 year, not 4, that has passed since Lockwood Manor. Claire's arc will wrap when she realizes that her real hang-up isn't freeing herself of guilt, but rather her fear of failing Owen too. Owen, once a loner, will figure out that what he's feeling is loneliness, having been separated from Blue the Raptor and feeling the gulf between himself and Claire that the mission had created, and choose to voice his needs rather than bottle them up, all after a couple poignant observations and conversations with the parallel pairing of doctors Alan Grant and Ellie Sattler. Grant is living on Isla Sorna and studying the animals there. Yes, I am stealing my own concept of Grant's situation from How to Fix Fallen Kingdom, because one thing that bugged me about the Jurassic World trilogy is how little it paid homage to the Park sequels. Jurassic Park 3 in particular is rarely referenced, and as Dominion is for all intents and purposes the culmination of the 2 trilogies, I feel very strongly, as you will see in the coming minutes, that including characters, ideas, and plot threads from every single one of the movies in the franchise should have been the basis for this conclusion. And more importantly, it still jives with both the character and the continuity, and I like it. The story actually opens with the reintroduction to Grant. He has been observing drone activity above the island over the previous months and begins to investigate when an unmarked plane lands at the airfield. He is never able to get there because he runs into his old pal the Spinosaurus, which almost catches our intrepid paleontologist before it suddenly and inexplicably becomes immobile and catatonic. This would not be the first time Grant has encountered the animals acting strangely. Like in my previous How to Fix, he once had a working relationship with Owen, feeding him information on the raptor tribes, and so he tries to contact Grady for help. When Owen doesn't answer, Grant reaches out instead to Ellie Sattler and his old apprentice Billy Brennan, and they manage to find Owen, who had gone to ground following the Lockwood Manor incident. As in the movie, Ellie's marriage to Mark Degler has fallen apart. She will reveal at one point that the reason for this was that once their kids were grown, she and Mark realized they had little in common. Their courtship had been built on commiserating about their similar romantic pasts and enhanced by their mutually comforting dispositions. They loved each other, but they weren't in love. They split amicably, and Mark remained happy to use his connections at the State Department to help his ex-wife out. Revelations about the collapse of the romantic relationship between Grant and Ellie will both offer closure to fans and help Owen work through what actions he should take to solve his issues with Claire. Billy Brennan also makes a return, recruited by Ellie to journey with her and Owen to Isla Sorna to assist Grant. In the years since his brash actions on the island, Billy has lost his mojo, choosing the path of the astronomer over that of the astronaut. After all, he had only barely survived the island, more by luck than anything else. He does laboratory research instead of field work, and his arc will find him rediscovering the side of himself Sorna had taken. Maisie Lockwood is back, and she, together with Iris Carroll, lives in the repaired Lockwood Manor. Ben Lockwood had left the entire estate to his granddaughter, and in light of Eli Mills' passing, entrusted to Iris until Maisie came of age. Maisie is using her wealth and land to resolve the problem that her decision to let the dinosaurs free had caused. She heavily lamented every reported incident of the dinosaurs having a negative impact on the environment, on the native wildlife, and most damagingly of all, to people. So she has converted much of the land of the estate into a makeshift Jurassic World, with fencing to keep the animals in. At the time the story begins, she has several herbivorous dinosaurs on her land. More on her actions to that end later. Also rejoining the cast in prominent roles are Ian Malcolm, Henry Wu, Lewis Dodgson, and Sarah freaking Harding. Malcolm and Henry are like their movie counterparts working for Bison, with Malcolm's starting role changing the least. He's still operating as a sort of guest lecturer, admitting to his daughter Kelly via phone call that although he remains idealistic in his pursuit of swaying brilliant scientific minds away from the allure of capitalistic ventures, he was also well aware that Dodgson hired him for a less than altruistic reason. Dodgson, for his part, will reveal to a repurposed Sayona Santos, now his head of security, that he wanted Malcolm there because when you pay all your critics, then you have no critics. Wu, on the other hand, is not there by choice, as he seems to be in the film. Dodgson had intercepted him fleeing the scene of the Indoraptor escape, arriving fortuitously late to the auction, and spirited him back to Bison headquarters, using the threat of turning him over to the authorities as a way to make him comply with Dodgson's requests. I will get to what Dodgson wants shortly, but Wu is deeply unhappy being what amounts to a prisoner of Bison, and even more unhappy doing what Dodgson wants. He feels backed against the wall. I really liked Dominion Dodgson's Tim Cook brand of villainy, so when I picture the character now, that's who I see. Characterization-wise, I don't think we need to change him at all. His goals and motivations are broadly the same, that being to make Bison unreasonably successful, but how he goes about doing so will be monumentally different. Again, stay tuned. Sarah Harding is back too. Movie Harding never got a chance to change our minds about how truly terrible she really is.
She's the worst.
So I would like to try and redeem her in this fan fiction fix. She is the lead paleobiologist for the Department of Prehistoric Wildlife, who early on in the story encounters Claire and Zia freeing one of the recently acquired dinosaurs, a Sinoceratops. As the story begins, she already suspects the hastily formed DPW of being at some level corrupted, and is interested in helping Claire's team to discover the who, what, and why of the mysterious disappearances of several captured animals. Her arc includes realizing her own narcissistic tendencies blind her to the needs of the people around her, which helps Claire to recognize that her obsessions were preventing her from moving forward with Owen. Specifically, the needs of her DPW assigned assistant, Hazel Fielder. Hazel is our last main character, and will instantly garner Claire's attention in their first meeting. But at an early point in the narrative, she and Harding will seek Claire out, arriving at Lockwood Manor only for her importance to come out. The fallout of this revelation will drive her arc and the arc of some of the other characters throughout the story. Other ancillary characters include repurposed versions we've seen or read about before. Rain Delacourt will now be the corrupt head of the DPW, a bureaucrat interested in advancing his career. Sayona Santos is Bison's security lead and essentially operates as Dodgson's right hand. Howard King also works for Bison as a field operative who runs the research being done on Isla Sorna. Last would be Kayla Watts, who instead of being a pilot is Bison's lead virologist. Watts will appear periodically throughout the story, interacting mostly with Malcolm on the topics he discusses in his lectures, but serving a pivotal role near the end. Okay, with the characters, their motivations, and their arcs out of the way, let's get to the basics of the plot. There are 4 separate threads that we follow in this story that are woven together around Dodgson's scheme, which is fairly simple. the utter extinction of InGen and Masrani dinosaurs. Both companies still technically exist in the timeline, and they hold the patent on the surviving nublar dinosaurs running around Northern California and the dinosaurs thriving on Isla Sorna. But Dodgson wants to be the sole provider of dinosaurs to a post-Jurassic World globe. Zoos, sure, but also miniaturization for pets, weapons of war, and pharmaceutical potential, among other unforeseen uses. If nublar Sorna dinosaurs were still around, it could muddy the possible monopoly bison would hold on the market. Those animals had to go. That's where Wu comes in. Wu is being forced to help develop a virus, which they call DX, that will target only the carefully crafted genetic makeup of the animals made by InGen for Jurassic Park and Jurassic World. This is why captured dinosaurs have been disappearing from DPW custody and why animals have been going catatonic on Sorna. Wu, without his original research on hand, needs samples of his original work to hone in on a way for the disease to only corrupt the DNA of OG animals so that 1. The environment and wildlife around them are not impacted, and 2. It won't destroy Biosyn's secret burgeoning crop of new dinosaurs. They have also been covertly testing Wu's work on the animals of Sorna as a control group so that the perfected virus can be deployed safely in the Murrelet State Wilderness where Maisie had let loose the dinosaurs from the manor. The threads of this narrative are, again, divided into 4 storylines. The first one introduced will be Grant's investigation on Sorna, with him eventually joined by Ellie, Billy, and Owen on the island. They will run afoul of both dinosaurs, including the mated pair of Rexes and both tribes of raptors, among many more, and Biosyn forces on Site B who are there to observe the results of the virus, which has been delivered to specific keystone species like the Compsognathus herds, raptor packs, and a few species of herbivores via drone injections. Is it over the top and silly? Absolutely. But Jurassic World and Fallen Kingdom have, by this point, created a pattern of increasing absurdity. Attempting to ground the franchise now wouldn't just be futile, it'd be jarring. So I'm leaning into some of the more preposterous elements of the Jurassic World movies to wrap up my series, while still maintaining my commitment to character work and memorable story. At the end of the second act, Grant is able to use his knowledge of the island to trick the Biosyn crew into putting themselves in danger, essentially neutralizing them. Billy, the astronaut, will re-emerge from his slumber, and he and Owen will overpower the leader of Biosyn's forces, Howard King, forcing him and an airplane pilot to fly them to their headquarters in Palo Alto to confront Dodgson. Another storyline will splinter into the second and third storylines. After Claire's team rescue the Sinoceratops from a temporary DPW camp where she encounters Harding for the first time, Owen is approached by Ellie and Billy to go to Sorna. Claire, along with Zia and Franklin, will be at Lockwood Manor when Harding and her assistant Hazel track the dinosaur to the estate. Sarah tagged it with a personal tracker, so the DPW was left in the dark. From there, Harding, Claire, and Franklin will journey to a DPW facility at a place called Oric Hill to investigate why captured dinosaurs had gone missing from it, and what role the head of the DPW, Rain Delacourt, may have played in the disappearances. Harding is able to sneak the other two into the facility where Franklin will hack into their local DPW servers, discovering that one particular animal had been earmarked to be delivered to a rendezvous point within the next hour. That dinosaur? Blue the Velociraptor. Earlier in the story, there is a scene wherein a DPW group is investigating reports of a dinosaur when they are attacked by it. The dinosaur would be kept mostly hidden, but the audience can clearly hear its roars and screams, and we know it's a raptor. That scene ends with Blue being subdued and captured. Moving back to our point in the story, there is an incident in the facility where they have to run from an escaped pteranodon, which results in the death of Delacourt, but not before they learn he was taking bribes to send certain dinosaurs to an unnamed genetic company. The audience can suss out that that's Biosyn. The protagonists are able to escape the facility and make it to the rendezvous point. From there, they simply follow Blue's new captors straight back to Biosyn headquarters. The third is Maisie's story. Claire's team had managed to recapture several individual species of dinosaurs to be kept in the pens she had built on the estate. The purpose of this was to get as many as they could so that they could be moved in one fell swoop to Isla Sorna, preserving California's environment and the lives of the dinosaurs. Like Claire, she is throwing herself into this quest so that she doesn't have to confront the fact that she is a clone. But her fears surrounding her origin are thrown into the limelight when Iris becomes distraught at the appearance of Hazel at the door. It is when Hazel and Maisie catch sight of one another inside the lobby that the truth comes surging out. Hazel is Ben Lockwood's original clone of Charlotte, created in 1992, only a year after Charlotte's death. As the story progresses, more of her story is told. She was also raised to believe she was Charlotte's orphan daughter, but Eli Mills had accidentally let it slip in 2007 when she was 15 that she was in fact a clone. When Hazel confronted Benjamin, he did not deny it, and she had run away, leaving behind everything. She had managed to lead a decent enough life, putting herself through school and eventually going to work with the National Park Service. When Hazel had learned of the dinosaur outbreak at Lockwood Manor, she had volunteered herself to the DPW in a bid to fix Benjamin's mistakes. She was heartbroken to learn of Mill's betrayal and admits she cried, despite her resentment for him, when she found out about Ben's death. Hazel insists she had no idea Maisie existed and didn't ever entertain the possibility that Benjamin would make the same mistake twice. Maisie, for her part, is not as upset at this revelation as Hazel. Hazel laments that Maisie, like her, has to come to grips with this unnatural resurrection, but Maisie is comforted by the fact that she was not alone, as she had once thought. She had, for all intents and purposes, a sister many years her senior, who could share what she had learned about herself and the nature of who they were. Hazel, in her interactions with Maisie, will begin to change how she perceives her origins. Who Hazel was and how she acted at Maisie's age, it was night and day. Where Maisie is energetic and rambunctious and outgoing, Hazel had been composed, thoughtful, and socially awkward. We additionally learn from Iris, who tries to reconnect, mostly unsuccessfully, with Hazel, that Charlotte had been quite the introvert, preferring her own company, reading voraciously, and going for quiet walks around the gardens. This all will guide both Hazel and Maisie to their collective realization that although their DNA was Charlotte's, it didn't define who they were as people. They stood apart from their mother, individuals with their own dreams, their own ideals, and their own personalities. As much as they had in common, they had just as much that separated them. The last storyline is that of the Biason-based characters, Ian Malcolm, Henry Wu, and Louis Dodgson. Malcolm naturally suspects Dodgson's up to something and manages to gain access to parts of the facility that he should never be in. He finds Wu, who spills the bean on Dodgson's plan to Malcolm, and implores the Chaotician to find a way to alert authorities. Dodgson was expecting success soon after Blue the Raptor was delivered to the lab. As ever, Blue is the key, the last step Wu needed to help complete the virus, as Blue and her sisters were the first dinosaurs Wu made for Masrani. They had been special because they were a bridge between Wu's original InGen animals and his Jurassic World creations. Blue blended both eras of his work together, but Wu loathes the idea of wiping out his life slavers. He felt he had no choice but to give Dodgson what he asked. There was really no way around the cruel fact the only way to save the dinosaurs now was that the virus never be released. Malcolm, however, is found out by Santos and similarly imprisoned, preventing him from getting the word out. As they languish, Wu recounts that Dodgson once approached him about jumping ship to Biason, back when rumors about what InGen was doing were floating around the Gentech community. But Wu hadn't disclosed to Hammond or InGen that a rival company had made advances toward him. He admits it was because he was leaving the door open in case he ever became unhappy working for them. Throughout this narrative will be little vignettes of one particular dinosaur's travels around Merlitt State Park. The mighty Tyrannosaurus, known to every fan as Rexy, will wreak havoc as she moves through the forest, encountering campers, native wildlife, and at one point the DPW itself. Each time she manages to elude capture until finally she finds herself right outside the fencing surrounding Lockwood Estate. The game pieces are therefore in position for the final act. Blue's captors, followed closely by Claire, Sarah, and Franklin, are the first to arrive. Wu is forced to locate the final piece of the puzzle with Blue's genetic sample, ultimately sending his findings on to Kayla Watts and the rest of Biason's virologists, who are working on an aerosolized version of DX. Malcolm watches on, waxing philosophical about the implications of what Wu could unleash. On the one hand, the dinosaurs were invasive, not just to the land, but to time itself. Their extinction would be akin to hitting a reset button. On the other hand, they were in fact living creatures, and euthanizing them carried with it a certain moral burden. There lay also the possibility that Wu's virus could mutate and become dangerous to things other than just InGen Masrani dinosaurs. Wu here tells Malcolm that he and Hammond had been so reticent to create a kill switch for the animals that they conspired to create the bogus lysine contingency, banking on the scientific illiteracy of their investors to bamboozle them into funding such a risky proposition. Meanwhile, Claire, Harding, and Franklin have infiltrated Biason using Franklin's hacking skills. They make it to a server room where Franklin finds information that sends Claire and Sarah to find Henry Wu, as they suspect whatever Biason was up to had to be related. Erstwhile, Biason's virologists are working feverishly on their first batch of the completed virus. One batch made is bottled in a small vial, sealed in a thermosized container, and sent away with an employee. Sarah and Claire find Wu and Malcolm, freeing them from the lab. Sarah and Malcolm greet each other with surprise and warmth, having not spoken in years, and the two women get a quick rundown down of what Wu has done. Realizing the danger it posed, Claire tries to get a call out, but all of their tech is in a dead zone created by Biasin. This is all short-lived, as a passing security guard catches them in the act and raises the alarm before Claire knocks him out. The facility goes into lockdown. Dodgson, fearing that their interlopers had already alerted the authorities, orders that as much of the virus in aerosol form be made as soon as possible. The Sorna testing grounds were too far away. No trial runs, no sample sizes, nothing. They were going to release it to the invasive dinosaur population right now, starting with a flyover of the epicenter of the dinosaur escape, Lockwood Manor. Locked out of every room in the facility, Claire and Sarah start racing Malcolm and Wu back toward where they had left Franklin, only to encounter more armed Biasin guards. Maisie and Hazel are finishing their conversation with Iris about Charlotte when a perimeter alarm sounds. Zia Rodriguez checks their feeds to find out that it's Rexy crashing through the fencing, allowing her access to the dinosaurs Claire's team had captured and creating a way for those same animals to get out. The team had always had a plan for Rexy if and when they were able to catch her, and that was that the entire bottom floor of the lab where the dinosaurs had escaped from had been converted into makeshift pen just for her. Zia gears up and gets into a side-by-side, reluctantly letting Hazel convince her she couldn't go alone. Their plan is to get the T-Rex inside the lab to keep her from killing the herbivores in the pen. Maisie is only kept from coming when all three women firmly tell her no, so she remains with Iris. Grant, Owen, Ellie, Billy, and their two captives land on Biasin's airstrip to find the headquarters in full lockdown. They'll see another plane take off just as they land, and Howard King, hearing the codename of the operation over the radio, will gloat that they were too late to save the dinosaurs in Murrelet. The virus would be unleashed and it would spread quickly among the population. Upon learning that the disease would target not just dinosaurs, but anything with patented InGen Masrani tech, Owen calls Iris and frantically tells her to get Maisie into the lab beneath the manor and seal her off, briefly explaining why right before they are all captured themselves by Biasin's security team. What is left for the finale cuts between the events at Biasin HQ and the events at Lockwood. I'm going to stay on Lockwood for a minute, but I want you to understand that if this was an actual screenplay / film, we'd be cutting back and forth, and I'm just telling this as efficiently as I can. Iris and Maisie, waiting in the lab control room to shut the door on the Rex, are horrified by Owen's call. They are not in direct contact with Zia and Hazel. Maisie moves to run out of the manor to warn them, but Iris is faster, sealing her in the room and sprinting out of the house. The Rex is menacing a Triceratops when Zia and Hazel light a flare, which the dinosaur promptly notices before she gives chase. Zia floors the vehicle back toward the manor as the giant carnivore nips at their metaphorical heels. Iris runs out of the manor in time to see the Rex clip the cart just hard enough to send it crashing into the dirt on its side. The Rex begins to approach the stunned women still inside the vehicle when Iris uses a flashlight she had taken with her to catch the animal's attention. Hazel and Zia scream at her not to, but Iris calls out to them that Hazel needed to barricade herself in the lab with Maisie. There's no time to explain. Iris says she loves Hazel as she had loved Charlotte, as she had loved Maisie, and that she was sorry. Then she turns and bolts for the big bottom floor lab door where the prepared pen was waiting. Zia and Hazel chase after the Rex as it bears down on Iris. Maisie watches as Iris makes it into the pen, followed closely by Rexy. Iris catches her eye, mouths, "I love you," and is promptly caught in the awesome jaws of the Tyrannosaur. Maisie, doubled over in grief, must, in a cruel reversal from her final act in Fallen Kingdom, shut the blast doors on the pen, trapping the Rex inside with her prize. The plane is approaching now, and they can hear it. Zia ushers the grieving, injured Hazel into the house and just barely make it into the airtight lab with Maisie before the plane comes rushing over and drops its gaseous payload on the estate below. The dinosaurs that had previously been in danger of being Rex food now breathe in the mist left behind by the plane. Let's now switch back to Biasin HQ and the capture by Sayona Santos of Claire, Malcolm, Sarah, and Wu. They are brought to the control room, which, like in the movie, overlooks the valley, and where it turns out Owen, Grant, Ellie, and Billy are already being held at gunpoint by Howard King and a few security guys. There are brief reunions as the two groups mix. Dodgson seems more relaxed now, as confirmation that DX had already been sprayed over the manor was just coming through. He hefts the thermos-sized container with the DX, intimating that more runs will be made over Murrelet in the coming weeks as they make more and more of the virus. But even if this was their one and only shot, DX was out now, and eventually every InGen Masrani dinosaur would catch it and die, leaving Biasin the world's only supplier of dinosaurs, holding dominion over this hot new market. Dodgson correctly identifies Grant and Ellie and remarks it was curious that they and Malcolm would wind up here to witness the last breath of John Hammond's slow-dying dream, when it was they who witnessed the first mortal wounds. "Isn't it wild," he says, looking at Wu, "that we're all here again? To think it all started with embryos. While the legacy trio appears confused, realization dawns on Wu. Dodgson, rebuffed by Wu, had found someone else, Dennis Nedry, to secure the embryos all the way back in 1993. Everything that had happened since, the fall of the park, the release of the Bull Rex in San Diego, Billy's near-death experience on Sorna, even the events of Jurassic World and beyond, all of it had come to pass because Louis Dodgson had wanted to rob InGen of its intellectual property. Grant is especially incensed, charging Dodgson before being subdued. Dodgson makes his determination. Wu was going back to where he belonged, in the lab. He had more work to do pro bono for Bison. He was simply too valuable to let go or kill. In his mind lay the genius needed to perfect Bison's creations. Malcolm would be found dead the next morning, a victim of an unfortunate single car wreck. As for the rest of the group, there was nothing at all that would indicate they had come to Bison. No one knew where they were, so they would get to meet one of their other projects. Crafted using the remains Bison had received from the DPW, the Indoraptor had been resurrected. Minor cosmetic differences aside, the animal was slightly larger. Well, animals. Bison made 2 of them. The pair were held in the open-air pen at the Rancho San Antonio Preserve, up against which Bison HQ abuts on the outskirts of Palo Alto. Wu is furious to learn about the project, which he had not been consulted about, and just as impotent as he'd ever been, he and Malcolm have to watch as the rest of the group is ushered out of the control room and into the labyrinthian hallways of Bison HQ. Before they can be ushered into the pen, however, a commotion down the hall from them throws the conclusion of this story into full-on action mode. No one on Bison's team had found out about Franklin. Bet you forgot too. Franklin's been hard at work trying to figure out a way to save his friends, and he finally hit upon the perfect idea. Release Blue the Raptor, who now starts murdering Bison's security guards with abandon, including Howard King, who she kills roughly the same way the character bites the dust in the Lost World novel. There is a brief scuffle with the security staff escorting the main group, which results in Owen's arm being somewhat injured, but they are able to get away. It is also enough of a distraction that Malcolm and Wu get the jump on Sayona Santos, and the other security guy who had been left behind, pushing them over and escaping into the hallways. Malcolm and Wu have difficulty finding the rest of the group, while somewhere around them in the hallways they can hear Blue at war with security. Dodgson has watched all of this with mounting frustration. Sayona Santos has recovered from being bowled over and starts to tell her men to catch the escapees, but Dodgson stops her. He's got a better idea of how to deal with them, whispering something to a tech before he orders her to instead find whoever has been helping them with the door controls. The main group heads down the hallways, finally encountering Blue, who was in the middle of taking out one last security guy. The Raptor turns to them and starts to approach threateningly until Claire steps forward with her arm outstretched, doing the magic hand thing, just as Owen used to do. Blue recognizes her after a beat, locks eyes with the injured Owen, and then, without warning, she takes an attack stance and charges. The group braces itself for the incoming dinosaur. But instead of attacking them, Blue jumps over their heads and begins a 2-on-1 fight with the new Indoraptors, allowed to enter the facility by Dodgson. The hybrids had been creeping up from behind the group and were about to take Grant, Billy, and Owen, who were at the rear of the group. Because it's a tight squeeze for the Indos in the hallways, Blue has an advantage and is able to hold her own with the pair. One of them does break free from the melee to chase the group, but Grant, Ellie, Billy, and Owen have armed themselves with the blood-stained weapons dropped by the security team, and as it pursues them, they fire wildly at the hybrid. The Indoraptor, unfortunately, shrugs off those bullets, its thick hide deflecting major injury. At the other end of the facility, Sayona Santos discovers Franklin typing madly away at his laptop, which is connected to the server. She seizes him and his laptop, but not before he slams one last button. He's brought to Dodgson in the control room. In a moment of major backbone, Franklin demands the release of his friends and himself, or the contents of his data mine would be released publicly and sent to the authorities. Bison would be finished. Sayona reasons that there is no way he could get anything like that out digitally, as Bison's lockdown renders any information leaving the facility impossible. Franklin counters that the second the lockdown ended, everything he had found would be uploaded automatically. Dodgson has waited almost 30 years to be the only name in dinosaurs, and now it all seems to be crashing down around him. He takes the gun from Sayona Santos' hands and points it at Franklin's head. The ultimatum is made. Undo what he'd done with Bison's files, or else. Happening simultaneously is Malcolm and Wu rejoining the main group in the middle of the chaos. Bullets have had little effect on the hybrid bearing down on the group, and they're forced to run. The Indo had them cornered at a dead end as, unbeknownst to them, Malcolm and Wu run up. Billy, seeing no other way, moves to distract the animal, and when Grant tries to stop him, he insists. He was done living his life as the astronomer. He was an astronaut. But Wu sees Billy getting the hybrid's attention and tells Malcolm that so long as he was alive, there would be men like Hammond, like Hoskins, like Mills, and Dodgson, who would plumb the depths of his genius to produce horrors. No more. Wu runs screaming towards the Indo, capturing its attention and crying out to the group to get away. As the hybrid moves to attack him, Wu bolts down a perpendicular hallway, leaving the way clear for the group to escape the dead end. Wu does not make it far. I'm shooting for a PG-13 rating in my head, but I think there's a way to honor his novel death without getting into R-rated territory, so Henry Wu will die in the same fashion he did in Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park. It's the distraction the survivors need, and reunited all together, they leave the Indo to feast on Henry Wu. Unfortunately, it doesn't take long for the group to fracture once more, as the Indo that had been tussling with Blue reappears, having somehow shaken the raptor. Grant, Owen, Ellie, and Billy are forced to duck down a hallway to escape the Indoraptor's jaws, while Malcolm, Claire, and Sarah fall into a suddenly open doorway. It's the office of lead virologist Kayla Watts. Once inside and in relative safety, Claire is overcome with worry for Maisie, but Kayla Watts reveals that the chemical that was released over Lockwood Manor was nothing more than a mixture of glyceride and water, completely harmless. Malcolm's ego is rewarded when she explains that she had become increasingly uncomfortable with Biason's direction under Dodgson and what they were asking her to do. Malcolm's lectures had given her unease a clarity and understanding which had previously evaded her, leading her to ultimately swap DX with the sugary concoction. Claire insists that they now destroy what DX had been prepared, but Malcolm pushes back, stressing the danger on the other side of the door. Sarah, moved by Claire and Kayla's selflessness, finally does something not awful and chooses to join Claire and Kayla in her mission. Malcolm then reluctantly agrees, and off they go. Grant, Owen, Billy, and Ellie have managed to keep the other Indo at bay, but it has gotten too close and they are out of ammo. They manage to make it back to the control center where Dodgson is holding Franklin at gunpoint. The distraction of the four entering allows Franklin to dive out of the way, but the Indoraptor follows, causing massive chaos within the room, butchering several techs and Sayona Santos. In the course of the rampage, Grant takes the opportunity to take a few satisfying geriatric swings at Dodgson, but in a heartbreaking, confusing moment, the Indoraptor targets the pair as they wrestle near the window, and the three explode through the glass into the valley beyond. Claire's group is on the move, almost immediately encountering the Indoraptor that had killed Wu. Blue briefly returns to the fray, but starts immediately to lose ground. After a moment of hesitation, Claire whistles for Blue to disengage, which gets the attention of the Indo, allowing the raptor to escape down a separate hallway. Unfortunately, saving Blue's life in that moment means the Indoraptor beelines for the group. Kayla leads them into the virology lab, the Indo in hot pursuit. The big door closes on it, temporarily trapping it. This gives the crew enough time to find the vials of prepared DX, while Kayla begins to start up an industrial-sized walk-in incinerator. Sarah is chucking the last of the virus into the open hatch when the Indoraptor frees itself. She stays still in front of the aperture and jumps only when the Indoraptor's momentum seals its fate, flying through the hatchway and into the incinerator. The incinerator is lit and the Indoraptor and DX go up in flames. Sarah had been a hair too slow, however, and she collapses in Malcolm's arms with a clawed gash in her abdomen. She needs medical attention fast. But wait, there's more, because the thrashing of the dying Indoraptor causes pipes to burst, and the room begins to catch fire. Fire alarms begin sounding, and Kayla attempts to put out the fire with an extinguisher, but it's not working. They realize, too, that the fire suppression systems aren't kicking in. The building is automated, and right now the place has been in total lockdown. They abandon the virology lab. The four of them, holding Sarah between them, re-enter the control room again just in time to see Grant, Dodgson, and the Indo go out the window. The three land on a safety netting lining the outer building along the viewing windows, and Owen is first to reach for Grant, but the Indoraptor in its frenzy rips the net to shreds, sending all three to the ground below. Everyone is now looking over the window onto the ground below, where Dodgson is getting to his feet. The Indoraptor is about to strike when, in a callback to Jurassic Park, the head of a Giganotosaurus enters the frame and catches the hybrid between its teeth. The Indo tries to fight back, but the larger dinosaur is simply too powerful. I want to note that the Giga is hinted at several times during the course of the narrative, so while its full appearance is held until this moment, we have gotten glimpses and references to it before it makes its big entrance. As Claire hurriedly tells the shell-shocked group about the fire, Franklin is finding out the Indo's rampage had put much of the control room's equipment out of operation. He finds his laptop in the severed hand of Sayona Santos, jacks into an undamaged port, and starts to frantically hack. He's desperately trying to do two things at once: open the door to let Grant escape, from the valley and end the lockdown to evacuate the building. Owen, able to see out to the runway, asks Kayla if she can get him back out there. He then runs with her out into the facility. In the valley below, Dodgson flees to the door leading back into the facility, leaving Grant, still winded and on the ground, behind. Billy vaults down into the pen to grab Grant, who is regaining strength slowly, and together they try to go for the same door as Dodgson. The Giga throws the Indoraptor violently, and the body rockets towards them, forcing them to dodge out of the way. The organic missile puts a huge dent in the door, and Franklin immediately recognizes he can't now remotely activate it. For all intents and purposes, the trio below are trapped in the valley with the Giganotosaurus. The huge carnivore now turns its attention to the three humans in front of it. Before it can take a step, however, the door to the building explodes outwards, nearly crushing them, and fire erupts from it. They flee into the vegetation, the dinosaur, after a moment watching the flames, bounding after them. Malcolm and Claire try to stop Sarah's bleeding while Ellie searches frantically around the control room for something. Anything. She spots something on the belt of one of the dead security guards. Elsewhere, the fire has spread to a point that it is endangering the lives of Biosyn employees and the people in the control room. In the valley, Grant, Billy, and Dodgson run as fast as they can, the dinosaur hot on their heels. Grant is becoming exhausted, his age weighing him down, but Billy presses him onward. Fire is catching quickly among the trees. Franklin manages to end the lockdown, and many of the Biosyn employees are able to escape out into freedom and for the fire suppression system to come back online. The fire is now being held at bay by the sprinkler systems. It also allows Owen and Kayla, who had been unable to get through one last door out into the airfield, to get onto the tarmac, where a few security guards take notice of them. Before the guards can do anything, they are overtaken by Blue, once again saving the day. Owen and Kayla bolt for the helicopter. In the valley, Dodgson, Grant, and Billy continue to evade the Giga within the burning trees. The helicopter, with Owen as pilot, appears suddenly, circling, trying to find a place to land, which they eventually do. The trio move to intercept. The Giga's tail, however, knocks down a large pine fully engulfed in flame, blocking the path forward. The Giga approaches them, unconcerned that Billy is now waving a stick of fire at it. Before it can nab them, a bright light and a small explosion detonates at the tree line, catching the Giga's attention. Ellie had found and thrown a flashbang grenade. It's a temporary distraction that allows the humans to get away deeper into the valley and towards the chopper. They clamber aboard and Owen begins to take off. Kayla spots and draws attention to the thermos of DX Dodgson had somehow kept on his person. Owen looks at Grant, who is again moving out of survival mode and back into Dodgson must pay mode. But before the helicopter can clear the treetops, the Giga reappears and bites down on the landing skid. This is the moment. The survivors in the control room watch with bated breath as the chopper is close enough that they can see by the light of the fire the people within the cabin. Grant looks at Dodgson, at the thermos of DX in his possession. He looks at Billy, who is hanging onto the opposite side of the cabin bulkhead. He looks out at the control room where Ellie is standing. Finally, he turns to Owen, and he urges him not to make the same mistakes he had. Stay. Make it work. No more running. No more hiding. And then, Dr. Alan Grant, with all the strength left to him, will launch himself at Louis Dodgson, who loses his grip, and together, again, they will fall through space. They fall past the Giga's eye. The dinosaur releases the chopper, allowing Owen to pull away. Ellie, screaming, will attempt to jump into the valley, but Claire holds her back. Dodgson and Grant get to their feet. Dodgson holds the thermos up, relieved it's still intact, only to be promptly bitten into by the Giganotosaurus, destroying him and the last of his deadly DX. As Dodgson is being eaten, Grant looks to the control room one last time and holds his hand up in farewell as the fire begins to close in and he disappears from sight. Consumed by the flame, the Giganotosaurus roars. The story now winds down with closing scenes. Hazel and Maisie, dressed in funeral attire, pour through the big photo album we saw Benjamin Lockwood look through in Fallen Kingdom, with special emphasis placed on pictures of their surrogate mother, Iris Carroll. We next find Sarah recovering in a hospital with Malcolm and Kelly at her bedside, when they are visited by Hazel, who comes bearing flowers and hugs. Sarah is touched by this show of affection, a far cry from their more formal alliance at the beginning of the story. Now we go to the hills of Snakewater, Montana, where Ellie Sattler and Billy Brennan stand alone, overlooking the Badlands beyond. Ellie is holding an urn, and tears are running down her face, Billy's comforting arm around her shoulder. As they stand in the quiet, several people join them. Owen and Claire holding hands and staying close. Ian, Malcolm, Paul, Amanda, Eric, and a teenage girl, a daughter they'd had after the events of Jurassic Park 3, and bringing up the rear before taking their place at the side of Ellie and Billy are Tim and Lex Murphy. Befitting the man for whom they had gathered, Ellie gives a simple eulogy. We commit Alan Grant to his dusty earth, in memory of the forgotten world he sought to understand. for the great bones to which he devoted his life. We lay to rest here a scientist, a friend, a hero, a father, the last of his breed, the astronomer who went to space. We discover through dialogue between Claire, Maisie, Hazel, and Owen aboard a transport ship that the dinosaurs held at Biosyn's Valley facility have also escaped into the wilds of California thanks to the fire. Biosyn had already begun disseminating dinosaurs to other entities and individuals so as to start building their dino brand, and so dinosaurs are being found everywhere on the planet. Maisie's plan to return Masrani InGen dinosaurs therefore grows to include these Biosyn-made animals, but she is now ready to make the first delivery of captured dinosaurs to Isla Sorna. With Sarah's help, they'd been able to secure a partnership with the DPW, which allowed them to work hand in hand to solve the dinosaur problem ethically. Kayla is also on board with a team of virologists and assisted by Zia to try and reverse the effects their initial trials had had on the animals currently on the island. Maisie asks Claire if she wants to go, but Claire responds with a rain check, explaining that maybe she didn't have to keep her hand on the wheel all the time, and that maybe some things, and here she looks over at Owen, are just more important. Owen, meanwhile, is inspecting the cage of one of the animals aboard the ship. It's blue, and Owen is talking softly with her about how she would no longer have to fly solo, that where she was going, she could find what she had been missing from her life since she had lost her siblings at Jurassic World. It was time to stop hiding and confront a new future. The film ends with the characters aboard the ship watching the last cage being loaded aboard the ship, massive and well built, from which issues the growling we all know too well, before the scene cuts to that same cage being remotely opened on the shores of Isla Sorna. Rexy steps out onto the beach, peers around, and roars that iconic roar. From the jungle beyond, unseen, comes the answering roars of the mated pair that call Sorna home. Finn. Writing that Finn came with a real sense of relief. This one has been hanging over me for a long time. You've all been very patient with me. Since How to Fix Fallen Kingdom, I've had to step up and put more hours in at work. I've devoted most of my nights after my kids have gone to sleep to schooling. I've learned I'm going to be a father again, and that's 4 for those of you keeping count. And of course, we've learned some details about Rebirth that I wanted to make sure I didn't subconsciously try to steal. This How to Fix has been through dozens, if not hundreds, of iterations, a frankly insane number of rewrites, revisions, edits, and smoothing over. I knew most of my story beats going in, but sometimes I had to rethink how things happened or worked because they dead-ended or didn't feel thematically relevant. I wanted every main character, legacy and new, to get their moment in the sun and resolve their respective arcs. I wanted it to feel like the Avengers movie Dominion was promised to be. That's why I mostly breeze through the events of the first 2 acts, but get into detailed descriptions of the third, because that's where the most impactful moments are, the ones that will most likely embed themselves into the memory when we leave the theater, or in this case, close out the YouTube video. Jurassic World Dominion should have been bigger. Not in spectacle, but in emotion. It is by far the most disappointing film in the series, if not the worst. Fallen Kingdom doesn't have the benefit of the legacy characters to make things more interesting. I didn't feel the love for the franchise when watching these last 2. Only the cold, calculating hand of a lowest common denominator style of franchise writing. Say what you will about Jurassic World, and I have, but one thing I will give it credit for is that it felt like a love letter to Jurassic Park. Not just through its fan service callbacks, but through its very storyline, its direction, and its visual homages. Fallen Kingdom and Dominion don't have that same feel. They have more action, more dinosaurs, more of everything, but they don't have any of the same weight that came with being a Jurassic movie beforehand. They feel empty. Crafted well enough to entertain for a few moments, but not well enough to be remembered as perhaps their predecessors will be. And I don't want anyone to take this personally. So many of the comments on my videos have been defenses of the sequels, whether individually or en masse. And just because you like or love these movies doesn't mean I'm coming after you. I happen to love movies and TV shows lots of people think could use some improvement. Orca the Killer Whale, Thor 1, Ted 2, The Last Jedi, the list goes on. But I think part of loving a film is being able to understand why it's not perfect, and what critiques other people might have with it. We have to collectively accept that we're all different, with different tastes and different experiences, sometimes just different ages. I used to love that Ben Affleck Daredevil movie. I don't any longer, but there was a time when I did. Some stories bring us together in near universal acclaim, and those films become our classics. The Casablancas, the Star Warses, the Harry Potters, the John Wicks, the Raiders of the Lost Arks, the Jurassic Parks. Some of them divide us. Some of them unite us in disdain. My point is that our viewpoints are unique. What makes us laugh, cry, and cheer can vary. The videos in this series are about what I would do if I had the keys to the kingdom. And if they didn't entertain you, that's okay for you. And it's okay for me. We don't have to agree. I'm someone who prefers his action stories focused on a grounded, believable human element. Not all the time, but certainly most of the time. And there are people who prefer their action free of emotional weight. Popcorn light and fun with wild, fantastical physics and lots of quips. Some people don't like action films at all. But I also don't begrudge people their passions, and I love to engage with fellow franchise fans about the minutiae of the Jurassic universe. And so I close out not just this video, but hopefully this series. Perhaps I'll be back in a year's time to add Rebirth to the playlist. Maybe I think Rebirth is as good a film as it can be, and don't see the need for another entry here. I know most of my viewers and subs are here for this series, and may choose to flee as soon as I'm done talking. But if that applies to you, I just want to say before you go, thank you for being here. I've appreciated your time, and I hope one day to make more videos that interest you. But I'm not a YouTuber.
I'm not a rapper.
I don't record these for a living, or to eventually make money from this. I just love Jurassic Park, and I love to write about it. I love to critique it, and I love being able to form a dialogue about it. And sharing it with all of you is just a bonus. Now that I've talked for way too long, what are some of your thoughts on Jurassic World Dominion? Let me know down in the comments. And if you're still listening to my voice for some reason, please stay tuned for more Jurassic content coming your way. Subscribe to the channel so you'll be the first to know when I posted a new video. I'll be reviewing Rebirth the second I return from the theater, and there's more character analyses on the horizon, so stick around for that. Like and share and burn this valley down in the comments. I'm Brian I. This is Jurassic Kingdom. Later, nerds. But it would have also been so interesting to see Vanessa Lee Curtis's... Is it Vanessa Lee Chester? I think it's Vanessa Lee Chester, Brian. Because her last name is Curtis in the book. That's why.